Hello, everyone, and welcome to Past the Noise, the podcast where we do exactly that. We get past the noise. We have full, well-rounded discussions about whatever the topic of the day is. But we're going to have a conversation. We're going to dispel untruths and things that hinder our understanding. We're going to get right down to the root of what the issue is. We're going to talk about it from a variety of perspectives, whether that be social, cultural, spiritual, whatever the case may be. We're gonna do that. Just want to remind you before we get started that this is a discussion. If you're tuning in, we want to hear from you. So there is
Absolutely.
an opportunity for you to call in, make a comment, ask a question, state of opinion, whatever you want to do is fine with us. We are not asking you to call up and agree. We're not asking you to call up and disagree. We're asking you to call up and let us know what's on your mind. So absolutely do that. There's a link above the comments section, or depending on what kind of device you're using, you may have to click on the overview link in order to see the call-in link. It's actually labeled call-in link. And I will be dropping the call-in link into the comments from time to time, so you'll see it there as well. But we encourage you to join in and provide your feedback. I am Elder Hightower. I am your co-host, joined as always by co-host Apostle TB Walker. Apostle, how you doing today?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome. This is awesome, man, to have this discussion, and I'm really ready to get into it.
I'm excited about today's topic because race is one of those things that is sensitive but cannot be avoided. We cannot run
Absolutely.
from it because we're a country that has multiple races, and we've had issues with race. So we can run from it. You can run, but you can't hide.
Right.
We've been running from it from a long time for a long time. I think we got to confront some things and really discuss some things. So tonight we're going to discuss critical race theory. Unless if you've been paying a little bit of attention to the news, this is a real hot button topic. It's not something that's just about the schools. In fact, here in Maryland, where I live, the governor's race, one of the candidates, the Republican candidate for governor, made an issue out of CRT in Maryland schools. So this is something that's being put forth right now in the elections. It was put forth in a primary, and as we move into November to more elections and school board elections and school board meetings, you're going to see this more and more brought to the forefront. So I think this is a really important issue. I think you agree with me on that, Apostle.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, we are in a place, this is right now where we are. And even just dealing with this idea of critical theory, this whole concept of really taking a real look at not just what we see in society on the surface, but an underlying look is always uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
this is the place where most of us shy away, whether that's in the spiritual sphere, in our religious organizations, whether it's in education and whether it's in politics or even in society in general. This is where we generally look away. But I think we're
Yeah.
just, we're in such a shape that we're almost forced now to come face to face with ourselves, because that's
Yeah.
really who we're facing here, and that's always our biggest that's always our biggest monster.
Yeah. 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 And like any educational theory or something that someone's come up with in the academic realm, people try to define it multiple different ways and say what it is and what it's not. But
Right.
let's start tonight with hearing from one of the co-authors, one of the founders of, and the
Awesome.
person that actually coined the term. I want to hear first what she has to say about what critical race theory is, and she was the one who kind of developed it. So let's take a look.
Joining me
Doctor,
now is Kimberly Crenshaw, co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum, and the legal scholar who coined the term. I just wrote down a few of the notes of what people are calling critical race theory: Marxism, racism, bigoted. Is critical race theory Marxism?
Look, you know what? Here's the thing, Joy. Critical race theory is not so much a thing. It's a way of looking at a thing. It's a way of looking at race. It's a way of looking at why, after so many decades, centuries actually, since the emancipation, we have patterns of inequality that are enduring. They are stubborn. And the point of critical race theory originally was to think and talk about how law contributed to the subordinate status of African Americans, of indigenous people.
Is there a K through 12 curriculum on critical race theory that's being taught in schools around this country?
I'm one of the co-authors of one of the few books on critical race theory. I think I would know if we were being taught in K through 12. I mean, basically, critical race theory, classic critical race theory, is a law school course.
Yeah. So Your thoughts on what Dr. Crenshaw had to say?
Well, I listen, that's the definition. That, what she laid out was clearly the definition of, what critical race theory really is. And again, it is that unflinching look at the systems that, that really guide our society, that really guide our world. And the idea that, racism is something that is endemic, that is something that is a part of woven into our culture. I don't think that that's something that is so hard to really grasp, but I really get the difficulty because of the hijacking job that, that so many people have, the hijacking job that's been done by the right, the hijacking job that's been done by Fox News and by so many pundits and opposition of critical race theory that literally have admitted that they've never really even heard of it, have never read it. So I'm kind of amazed at the number of opponents that have come out against this thing that they've really never heard except from somebody like Tucker Carlson, and that maybe 15 minutes.
It's I mean, it's they try to simplify it for their audience,
sure,
regardless of which side you come on, because I mean people have sort of attention spans, but it's really a complex and sort of complicated legal theory about the way that race and outcomes intersect. And when you look at what it really is in terms of the theorizing of it, it seems like it's become sort of this proxy for what's going to be taught in schools, because with people trying to get there and saying, no, we don't want critical race theory taught in schools. And it sounds what they don't want is they don't want the fullness of American history taught in the schools. I don't know how you could teach American history, say anywhere between 1641, even up to now, but from 1641 to 1860, how would you teach American history and not deal with race? I don't know how you would do that.
Well, I think that's why critical race theory is so important, because there's been an impasse. I think that, the reality of the privilege that has been here in America, that's kind of woven into America, how it would be very difficult not to make your heroes the heroes, right? If you can, not to make your stars the stars if you can. And the reality is that they can. The reality is the systems are designed so that they can. And so I think that the reality of adding now truth in America, first of all, would have to, it seems like an accusation. And I think that that's the thing that's the hardest, to add now, to be able to say, hey, we left them out, means that, we're agreeing that we did something wrong. And I think that the reality is that there's a generation now that is, has to, we have to look and say, hey, we're not talking about you, but we're talking about a system that you still benefit from, and that you still are a proponent of moving the same narrative along. And I think that just has to happen. That's just one of those things. But I get the difficulty here because of the way it's been presented by the right.
So, my research on critical race theory and what it is, part of what it states is that the country was racist. It was founded on racist principles, and therefore, it was, systemic racism was implemented, but that the systems today are still racist, so that we still have systemic racism. I do not believe that America is still systemically racist. To me, systemic racism is when the system dictates the outcome and the people in the system have no choice. So the rules say you can't hire the black person for this job. The rules say you can't live here, you can't live there. Not to say that doesn't happen within, individuals might make that determination, but the system no longer makes those determinations for people. People now make those determinations for them, by themselves and for themselves. Do you agree with that?
Now, okay, so let's take a look. I just want to kind of go back over what you're saying. Now, you're saying that the systems that were in place are still no longer in place, right? You're saying because of the various amendments that are there.
Right.
The written system has actually changed.
Correct.
Got you. Okay.
Right.
So now, if the written system has changed, but the mindset of the people who operate the system has not changed, then sure, you can write down that you must hire X amount of people, or that you must interview X amount of people. But then isn't there still a system that's governed in the mind, in the attitude that's in the spirit, even not in the true spirit of the amendments, but in the spirit that still is here, won't you still operate that very same system based upon preference and privilege? Won't you incarcerate on based upon, when you look at mass incarceration and you look at the numbers there, doesn't that look like there's a system that's still at work? When you look at what inner city schools and when you look at education and how education is still moving and doled out and the money and where it's going in this country, wouldn't that still indicate that the system is still operating under new rules, not Jim Crow anymore, not under slavery, but simply just in a new offshoot of that very same system? I think can't enslave anymore, but we now have this great prison. Now, let me be quiet here. Go ahead.
No. I mean, you got a point there. And actually, there's a couple of ways in which slavery actually still is instituted, and one is if you're incarcerated, it's slavery. Still legal. So to your point, however, I would still say it's different. Like once the system has been removed, depending on how long the system was in place. Absolutely, the system embeds attitudes and prejudices that cannot be overcome like that. I mean, the 13th Amendment was passed, ending slavery. The next day, people still were prejudiced and racist. I mean, that didn't change that, and it hasn't changed it to this day. So, no, the system. To your point, I agree with that, but I still say it's different. I think we got to make that distinction that the system has been fixed. Now, you say, has it been fixed enough to where it's still, we're getting the outcomes we want? But I think the system itself is not racist. I think people may still be taking those same racist ideals into the present day, but I think the system itself has been repaired or fixed, if it will. I mean, technically, not,
So what about what do you think the parents are arguing about? When you look at take a look at one of those a clip where you've got, because I suspect that you've got an area here where you've got some parents here that are against critical race theory, and I suspect that even what they're going to say, is in some ways an indicator of the fact that this is something that has not actually been confronted. You could pick any one that you want, but I mean, there's some Florida clips that are there that I think that you might really, really take a look at. Check out one of those.
Okay, so let's look at the Florida clip where parents are talking about they're opposing CRT. Let's look at one of them.
Collier County, Florida is affluent, overwhelmingly white, and twice voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. It seems an odd place for a row about race and political philosophy, a topic previously confined to obscure academic journals. But activists in Collier County are doing battle over the Au Courant culture war issue, the teaching of critical race theory, or CRT, to K-12 students.
So what is this meeting about? It's about textbooks, books filled with Marxist, communist, racially divisive ideologies.
CRT is a decades-old academic idea centering the role of racism in cultural and political life. But in the current debate, its meaning is ill-defined.
This critical race theory urges intolerance of all human beings that have been created in the image of God.
I do not agree with teaching children how to feel about things. That is called indoctrination.
I'll be damned if I will allow a Marxist revolution to take place in this country, and we need to reject our children even being taught it.
Okay. What are your thoughts there? Because it's very clear. I mean, when you look at the system, you would have to agree that the system is still run and operated by the predominant group in this country, which are whites, right?
You mean I would say that's where the power lies in this country.
That's where the power lies.
Yes.
Now, when you saw those clips, what was your interpretation of what you heard them saying?
So first of all, let me tell you, I hear a lot of fear. So I hear a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of sort of hostility and aggression to something that they clearly don't understand. So two of them mentioned Marxism, which is in itself a extremely complex with a bunch of different tentacles sort of theory about economics and whatnot. But the main part is that Marxism is opposed to capitalism. So if we're going to have Marxism, you would remove capitalism and go to Marxism. So they're kind of going there. But that's not really what CRT is. Not Marxism.
Right.
Marxism is a theory that says the workers control everything, and so and sort of everyone gives to the state or to the country based on their ability, and then they get the same equal things back. So you and I both have 2 kids. You're a doctor. I'm a whatever. I'm a school teacher. We both have 2 kids. We both get 6 potatoes and 15 steaks at the end of the week.
Right,
so
right.
It removes classes and upperclassmen. It removes all that stuff. That's what Marxism is in a nutshell. Clearly, this is not that. I mean, clearly this is not Marxism. But you hear in these parents' voices a serious fear about the way that history will be taught to their kids, almost like they're scared for their kids to learn to know the truth about this country. Like they're scared to say, yes, it was founded on racism. Yes, some of those things still happen today. That seems to be the real fear. And the Marxism is just sort of a phony thing they put up to sort of scare people. Oh, it's Marxism. No.
No, so again, that's kind of my point here is that I think that this lack of confrontation about simple truth, this unwillingness to deal with truth in this major system, which is the educational system, you know, aren't they in some way showing the desire to not really critically take a look at the system and therefore keep the same teaching that we'd have to agree has kind of whitewashed our history in America and has done damage by keeping truth out of the curriculum?
So I think that when you're talking about, especially talking about white people, I think there's a sense of not wanting to be blamed for something they didn't do. So to speak, they don't want that. And so what they want is to say, let's teach based on now. Let's not look all the way back to the founding. We're past all that. We should be past all that. And so I strongly disagree with that. I think the only way to get from where we are to a better place is to acknowledge the country was racist, the system was fixed. We still have some issues, but I think if you ignore any one of those elements, I think you're left with a swearing match back and forth. It's Marxism. It's this. It's that. You don't get for the issue, which is, was this country ever racist? If you say no, then we can't have a conversation because now you're out there. You're delusional. You don't know history. So I really can't. I don't really have a whole lot to talk to you about. But if we can get to, yes, it was racist. Yes, the systems were fixed on a technical basis. What do we do now that these outcomes that seem to hurt Black people, minorities? Where do we go from there?
Well, I mean, I think, and you're totally right. I mean, I think that's really where we've got to go. But I think that, when you look at the outcomes and you look at the system that is fixed, if the system is fixed, but the outcomes are broken, how can that system then, by definition, be fixed? If the outcomes are what they are, if the outcomes are, when the numbers, in terms of incarceration, in terms of poverty, in terms of, being literally childbirth and death, mortality rates in children. When you think of all of the things that are there, how can the system be fixed if the outcomes actually show that they are status quo or going backwards?
Okay, so when I say the system is fixed, I would say that the oppressive legislation was the overt oppressive legislation was removed. They abolished slavery and other racial things like interracial marriage and that sort of thing. So those things are gone. But I would strongly argue that there's more work to be done even in the system. But the system that was is no more. The system that was just strictly 100% oppressive and degrading, that system is gone.
Absolutely.
We have another system that's not like operating, not kicking on all cylinders, but it's better than what it was, but it's not what it should be. So that's where I am. It's not where it should be.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with you there. I mean, there's no way that we can compare where we are now to where we were. And I think, in being honest in terms of that, taking a real critical look, it's necessary to really say that, to really understand that we've got a long way to go, but we're not where we were.
Right.
No doubt about it.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to mention was I think that for Black people who reject CRT or speak out against it. I think there's a fear that they're being told something that's not true. In fact, we have a clip. Let's look at this clip.
Okay.
Black father. He's at a school board meeting. We have a lot of school board meetings, and here's what he had to say about.
Okay.
CRT.
When you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much what it's going to. That's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get this stuff? Because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't going to be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't going to let you get no, oh, you know you're not going to be able to do it here because you know, the white man going to keep you down. I work for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You going to sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? Of this the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? But if you want to implement this into the school system, I guarantee you to the day that I die, I'm going to be the very person right there debunking stuff, tearing stuff down, letting them know they can do exactly what I did and get exactly where I am by putting themselves to work and getting there. And ain't not one white person ever going to keep any of them from getting there. So the CRT stuff, BS. When you talk about critical...
He's pretty worried. He's
serious.
Yeah, I mean... I get where he's coming from. Like he doesn't want to be told. He doesn't want his kids to be told you can't make it because somebody's holding you down. I think that's it, but I think that's an extreme. I think you can tell your kids there are going to be some obstacles in your way that may not stop you all the way, but they may trip you up. And you got to watch for them. You have to work through them. But I think the idea that it's a completely level playing field and just like you have the same opportunity as everybody else, white or black, I think is disingenuous and misleading.
Absolutely. Well, you know, again, I think that kind of goes back to this idea. I think he may be thinking that the system is fixed. I think, in all honesty, that's probably the sound of the guy who says, hey, listen, because if the track is fixed, right, we would have, and there'd be no bumps for me. Right, you would never have to say, "Listen, when you go out to the field, there's going to be some obstacles." If the track is really fixed, see, right. I think it comes down to the determination for us is like, what is fixed? You know, I think is the ideal impossible for us to achieve. You know, I mean, when we really look at this, I think that critical race theory is really about helping us achieve the ideal, and we may be celebrating at the 50-yard line in some ways, when in reality, there's no other group that would have to celebrate at the 50-yard line, right. Simply because they've never had to stay at the 0-yard line this long. So we might be celebrating because it's gotten better. And I think the brother is a clear example of what it looks like when hey, I'm a doctor, right. And never really looking at the statistics countrywide. I was able to go to college and never looking at the statistics countrywide. And if you're 1 out of 1 million, and listen, if there's a lots of people in the country, and so you see 30, 40, 100 that look like you'll never know the 100,000 that just simply couldn't get there because the deck was stacked against them. That just financially the deck was stacked against them. Just socially, if you don't sleep, you can't study. If there are rats and roaches around you, it just makes it hard to excel. Right. Gunshots will do that. They'll keep you up at night. And so the idea, no matter, I don't know where he came from, but the truth of the matter is that, this goal that we've all come to, we all have to kind of get together to make this happen. And I think CRT is really bringing us together with this understanding that in order to make it happen, we have to realize it hasn't happened.
Yeah. I mean, yes, there has to be an acknowledgement that we have some ways to we have some more work to do as a country. To your point about the different outcomes in education, incarceration, things of that nature. I mean, some of it is. Well, all of it is socioeconomic, right? So even when we talk about the disparity in sentencing, and for different things.
Right.
The big
Crack,
one was
cocaine,
crack and powder cocaine. That was more economic than racial, but it had a racial element, right? If you're in a social economically depressed state, then you will buy one product and not the other, and that other product had different penalties, and they made no bones about it has different penalties, and some of that was, you have to know when you're, implementing these things, if you care, that it's going to affect one community more than another community. That's common sense. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, people, to your point, people being arrested for petty offenses, arrested for certain kinds of offenses, you'll see, it seems to be more prevalent in this neighborhood than another neighborhood.
Right.
You have to address that. If you don't address that, then you end up with what we have now, which is, to your point, mass incarceration and some serious problems with our educational system. Now, with regard to the issues in the educational system, and I'm going to real quick remind people that you can get on this conversation. I'm putting the call-in link in the comments right now. So if you want to click on that link, and
because I'd love to hear what they think. I want to hear what you think.
Me too. But I wanted to play a clip of an Asian American man.
Okay.
Who has his own feelings about CRT.
Okay.
In this country. So here we go.
You said it in the interview with FoxNews.com. Asian Americans prove that critical race theory is not true, cannot be true. Make that case.
Critical race theory asserts that the world in America is divided into a racial caste system, whites on the top, blacks on the bottom, but they have no idea what to do with Asian Americans, because Asian Americans are a minority. They have been discriminated against in this country, and yet they succeed and they achieve. And that I think inconveniences the critical race theory narrative.
So how is it that Asian Americans flourish in this country?
It has to do with culture. Asian Americans study twice as many hours as the average American.
Okay. It's not apples to apples, right? It's not an apples to apples comparison, because Asian Americans were never oppressed in this country the way African Americans were. They certainly were discriminated against, but you cannot compare the two experiences. To his point, there is an element of focus and hard work and sacrifice and all this kind of
absolutely
that can get you to to where you're trying to get to. So I agree with part of what he said, but I don't think it's as simple as, well, we're doing good, so black people should be doing good, which seems to be what the implication was. And I don't think you can make that connection.
I get it, though. I get it because, if you start now, if you start from now, if you were to meet someone, who had a great job and, who had a nice family. And if you start from right there, then there are some expectations you're going to have from that person. But if you went back and you recognize that person was, they had lived in a closet for the first 7 years of their life. And they were adopted at 12 after being abused, even after that period of being in the closet for 7 years. So it's miraculous that this person is here now, but there are going to be some consequences, some ramifications. There's going to be some things that are going to happen with that person because of those past traumas. I think that's what's misunderstood in this country, is that racism is a poison. And that racism, we just have received such a large dose of that poison that there's going to be a longer time to get to what is normality. I think when you look at what happened with Asian Americans, what happened with, the natives in this country, the enslavement of one group of people and the literally codifying of them being a percentage of a person has such a damage that I don't think that any other group in this country can really understand. And the targeting against this group financially, economically, physically, over time, the intentional breaking up of the family, the intentional taking away of the knowledge of who they are, it has such effects that this Asian brother cannot in any way possibly fathom the damage of being in that closet for that many years can have on a people that's actually, unfortunately, passed down. Because until we got the system right, you also were bending people in their mindset, and they were teaching the very same thing. and on both sides, black and white.
Yeah.
The idea of inferiority and the idea of supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at what happened on January 6th, we didn't just see something political, we also saw supremacy show itself. That this system, that there's literally a system underneath the system that's working. And I think CRT is actually pointing at that system that seems to be moving. You know, I was thinking about a brother who said something about the idea, you know, on, I think it was on Tucker Carlson, and he talked about, he said, you know, I'm talking to you, President Trump, you know, and he was talking about, you know, this idea of you have the ability to actually, you know, give out some kind of executive order to stamp this out. And, you know, the idea was that his chief of staff said, we heard it and we did it. So the idea of being moved by this undercurrent that is actually much more than undercurrent, I think is a system within a system.
Yeah, agree with that. Good points. We have a couple of callers.
Okay.
Let's go to Sean Fada. Sean Fada. Sean Fada, welcome to Pass the Noise.
Hello.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, it took me a few minutes to get off of mute. Interesting discussion, and I'm that last clip kind of upset me a little bit because there's a bit of arrogance and ignorance in that response, and I think you sort of clarified that a bit in your response, TB Walker. But there was just something about that, just like truly not understanding the history, and that's where here's what I've been thinking about as I've been listening. I feel like CRT derails the most important thing that we need to talk about, which is really making sure that our children understand our true history. So they understand from the very beginning how racism infiltrated this country, not just against blacks, but again, if you really, really listen to the thinking behind the founders, it was really against anyone who wasn't like them. And so they weren't welcoming all the other cultures into this country from the very beginning. That's why I think history needs to be understood so that you can understand it at the root of the problem that we deal with on a daily basis and we've been dealing with for centuries is a sense of, as you said it beautifully, supremacy over others, thinking that you are better than everyone else. So I take CRT theory and I throw it up against the wall. What I'd really love to see happen in the school system is them taking the time to actually teach history as it really happened, to take the things that our founders actually said and make sure our kids understand that this is why there's this divide in the country. They're not too young to understand it. We're not pointing fingers at these young kids because they haven't done anything yet, but they might if we don't educate them. So just a thought. I'd love to hear you all's thought about sort of that movement from CRT, because I just really feel like, I almost feel like the opposition threw that into the mix to just get us off of what's really important. So just something to think about. But thank you. I'm all over this. I love it.
Awesome.
No, thanks for calling. I think CRT is the fight over what history is going to be taught in the schools. It's become the stand-in for, are we going to teach about slavery and oppression, that kind of stuff, or are we not? That's what it's become. I mean, for better or worse, that's what it's, you know, that's what it is now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think that, you know, CRT is a lot less about slavery and really more about, you know, really looking at the start of our nation. Mm-hmm. You know, in order to really celebrate, and I think that there is a celebration that we're maybe missing here, you know, and the celebration of how far we've come can't really happen unless we really understand where we've come from. Right. You know, this idea that, man, we've really come a long way. It's not that far if we don't really understand that we didn't start this way. We never intended, you know, for people to really be equal. We really never thought of ourselves as this big melting pot that we are now. You know, we never expected to have, you know, this person at the 7-Eleven and then another person at another 7-Eleven, and they look different and they sound different, and cab drivers and doctors that are black and white. We never expected that. And you know what? We have to admit that. Part of this, you know, we didn't start here with open arms. And that's, you know, but we, you know, we, like, to your point, our arms are wider now than they've ever been. And I don't think that we can just say, hey, look at our arms now. Instead of really going back and saying, listen, when we teach in the past, let's teach how far we've come. Let's get an unflinching look at truth and teach our kids what really happened. Because other than that, we're really teaching modified history.
Right.
And that's dangerous because modified history is what leaves people out. Modified history is, you don't know where you start. So you don't know where you are.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Unless we have another caller.
Okay.
We have Willie May. Willie May, welcome to Pass the Noise.
Well, hello to you both, and Sean Fater. Actually, I was not trying to be on. I just kind of happened on.
Happy happening.
Yes, but I will ask a question since now that I'm on. First of all, I have to admit that I don't really know a whole lot about this CRA. Is it
CRT?
CRT. I don't really know a whole lot about it, but just from what I've gleaned in the last few minutes, hearing you say things like, we got to teach our kids. So I want to ask the question: what kids are you talking about? Are they really interested? Is this going to really be helpful to them? Because looking at the kids from my vantage point today, and I'm kind of thinking back with Dr. King, with all the things that he taught and tried to talk about. As I talk to young people today, a lot of them that should know about Dr. King don't even know about Dr. King and don't even care about Dr. King. So I just wanted to find out, who are these kids that you're talking about you want to teach that they should know about their history? Because for what I'm looking at, they don't seem to care about their history.
Well, I mean, I'll start with that question. Some of those are kids that are in schools now, and some of these are children that are not born yet. We have a generation that has been tainted and touched by this. What you said, that they don't have the knowledge, and they don't have teachers that are going to enforce the idea that these figures are important to know. Parents, so this is the part of the curriculum. And so this isn't something that even parents are even encouraged to get involved in. So I think that as we look at the future, there may be children that are not even born yet. As we begin to look at the school system, our hope is not going to be in grasping. There's a group of people that's going to help grasp the generations that are out there now. But I think when you begin to look at what we're looking at doing with the systems, our systems of equality, are things that Dr. King realized I may not be a part of. I may not see it.
Right.
But he said his hope was that, maybe his sons, and the sons of sharecroppers would be there together with the oppressors, that maybe that was the dream. So the idea that we're not living the dream right now, and that our children are not and being able to really grasp the dream is much more of an indicator that we've got work to do to make sure that when they get to see the dream, it's a true dream that encourages them and that actually has them in it as well.
Okay. Okay.
Elder, I don't know what you might have to add to that.
No, nothing to add to that. That was excellent.
That was a great response.
So one last question. So I guess you kind of helped me with it when you said that these are children who are not born yet.
Some may be.
Because as I'm looking at these children that we have currently today, they don't even want to stay in school. They don't want schooling. So I'm kind of hard pressed to believe that this is going to be something that they're going to grasp, that they're going to hunger after. I think the parents might. I don't foresee the children doing it, but like again, you said children not born yet. So I'm kind of waiting on the children that's not born.
Well, remember, I think as you look at children, there's always been, the guy who was in that clip who says, I'm a doctor. Right? When you look at his age and, this problem that we've had, it's been around for some time.
Right.
Every group, every generation, W.E.B. Du Bois talked about the talented 10th, right? Every generation has had people who've dropped out, who have not been, 60s, 70s. Look at all those generations. But within those generations, there were still Thurgood Marshalls. Right. And within those generations were still the Barack Obama. So there are a huge number of people, a number of children who are out in the streets right now who don't care. But we still have a group of kids right now that are still in school. There's right now in graduation classes, there are going to still be some kids that are going to graduate. And they're going to be parents. And so it's going to be a net necessity that if they didn't get that history, that they can grab hold of this so they can be a part of this revolution in teaching their children at home. I think part of CRT is going to be working and looking at systems, but it also enlivens the individual to begin to now teach on an individual level history.
Right. Do we think that the parents have any responsibility in that?
Education is the key. Parents can't be responsible for what they don't know.
Gotcha. Okay.
You can't teach what you don't know. And so part of what's going on right now is, I think, a educational awareness. The idea that there's no teaching that's being done yet. Right now, I think we're just in a stage of really understanding where we are, knowing that there's a problem, but critically looking at that problem to be able to see what's causing it. Because we've all been pointing fingers, but now it's time to really kind of stop and say, all right, I'm not going to teach anybody anything. What I'm going to do is really look at this myself critically and be able to see what areas need to be changed.
Right.
Because we don't want to throw everything out, but there's some stuff that needs to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, listen, I thank you so much for your response, and even though I kind of happen up on you, I have to say to you though, I did have a difficult time trying to get on, and I don't know why I had a difficult time. So we may have to talk offline about my difficulty. Okay.
Absolutely. We will do that.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. When it comes to, and we've been talking about history and teaching history and so forth, one of the problems with teaching people things is when they think they already know. They already know the answer, and so you can't teach them anything. I want to play a clip from a meeting in Baltimore around schools and CRT and some other stuff. But they did get around to talking about CRT. Let's take a look.
What is critical race theory?
Critical race theory is the idea that's taught to our nation's youth that the way that you're born contributes to the amount of success that you can achieve in this country. It basically states that white people are born with everything, and if you're not white, you're born with nothing.
Can you name any critical race theory scholars?
Probably not.
Can you name any critical race theory concepts?
I don't know what the concepts are. I think I summarized critical race theory as a whole pretty well.
To paint the country as a inherently racist country from its founding, I think is dangerous.
The Three-Fifths Compromise is written into the Constitution, in which slaves are counted as 3/5 of a person.
Of course, and that was applied at an earlier time. That is not the case now, obviously.
Well, you just mentioned the founding of the country, so.
Well, yeah, it wasn't perfectly written in the Constitution.
When did you first hear about critical race theory?
Sometime around last year.
Where'd you see it?
On Fox News. The idea that you can succeed based on your race is ludicrous. This is not the 1960s anymore. Just because of your skin color does not mean that you cannot be successful here in America. Point blank, period.
So interesting. I'll start with the last person first. It's interesting that the black people who seem to be against this seem to think that it means you're automatically going to be a failure.
Right.
Which is it's no, it's not. It doesn't say that. It doesn't teach that or anything like that. It just teaches that the outcomes that they've observed, that they believe that the outcomes are based on race. I mean, it doesn't say that you're doomed. Doesn't say that at all. And then the other two, I mean, what can you say about people who don't even know something that they're opposed to?
Right.
You understand it. I heard it somewhere. Somebody told me, and then they're saying what he summarized what somebody else told him about CRT, and the other guy, like, so that's that's the problem. Like he's saying no. But in the founding we weren't racist, and the young lady says, yeah, but, and he's like, well, yeah, but I mean,
it wasn't perfect.
It was perfect. I mean, that's an understatement if I ever heard one. But it speaks to the kind of ignorance that you're dealing with. And so the question would be, how are we ever going to get to a place where we can have an honest conversation about race with those people?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be hard. I mean, in the end of the day, it's going to be hard. Again, I kind of mentioned the whole race issue as a poison. And it, it doesn't just poison, the people that are oppressed by it. It'll poison the oppressor as well. I mean, I remember when you look at in Germany in World War II, I mean, when they were forced to use bullets initially in the original genocide, and it just drove the soldiers crazy. So not only were obviously shooting the people, they killed them, but it also hurt the person, the guy. They lost so many soldiers because of what they did. Racism does the very same thing. And I think that this idea of understanding our country and our founding would help those gentlemen as well. Not only just help them understand and be better people with Black people. That wasn't the goal. It's really to understand the truth of this country. And if they embrace people of all races, creeds, they'll understand, wow, we didn't start this way. Look at where we are. I think we're missing the hurrah that could be here by saying, hey, it's always been this way. And that's not true. That's not true.
No, it's 100% not true. And I think we talked about this earlier, but people seem to want to have a cutoff about how far we're going to go back to talk about the history of this country. Like those things. I mean, I think all the people we've heard speak on these clips, I believe are 100% sincere. I believe they believe what it is that they're saying. And that's a little scary. But they actually believe what they're saying. So when the guy is talking about, that was a long time ago. We shouldn't be talking about that now. He believes that. He believes that somehow there's a cutoff point at which that stuff no longer has any effect on today's society. Which is a big part of CRT was that no, it still is affecting our society today. And if you think that it's not, you're sadly mistaken.
Well, that's kind of what we've been going through in every area of our society, I think, like in the Me Too movement, right? I mean, there was a place where people said women are equal. And it was only recently that people start really looking and saying, well, wait a minute, this actress is getting paid this for this same movie. Well, wait a minute, she's a star. And here's this male actor, and he's getting paid this. We thought it was there until we took a critical look. Until there was a Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too movement, we just thought women were treated well, right? So we really are just in the same place in our society as a whole right now of really having to face ourselves. And I don't want to say face demons, because demons might be easier. I think it's the facing of ourselves that's really our struggle, that maybe we haven't treated everybody well. And we can get better. We can move, but we can't move forward if we're already saying, hey, listen, the NBA is the same as the WNBA. We treat the women fairly. We treat the women the same. No way. It's not the same.
No, it's not. It's not even close. It's not even close to being the same. But you're still going to have people who had their own perspective. And speaking of that, I want to play another one of those Florida clips.
Okay.
Because I think this sort of gets to what people are up against when they try to say, I want to teach the whole of history, in schools.
Keith Flaw is the founding director of the Florida Citizens Alliance, a conservative group that crusades against curricula it deems insufficiently patriotic or excessively progressive.
What did you see in those two books that you looked at? What did you object to?
Critical race theory. What critical race theory boils down to is teaching kids to hate their friends, teaching them to focus on race rather than focus on character.
So let's look at some of these examples from the K-5 books that you were objecting to the other day.
What I did was go through the teacher's manuals that are used to teach these books. And what you find is that it builds the foundation for critical race theory, not on the 3 words of critical race theory, but it builds the foundation on culturally responsive training, equity versus equality, social justice. So those are all innocuous terms in many people's minds, but when you look at how the left is now using those to drive the whole perspective of critical race theory.
That's it.
Insufficiently patriotic materials. I don't know where to start. So I guess, I mean, I actually was having a conversation with somebody yesterday. I mean, I guess that means you can't say anything bad about the country. You got to pretend like the country is perfect and no one ever made any mistakes or anything. I don't know how you would measure patriotism in the school curriculum. If it's true, right? If it's facts, how can that not be patriotic?
Well, again, I mean, what's patriotic in this country? You know, we've gotten to the point where patriotic is worship. You know, where we worship our founders. So I think with that worshiping, with that covering them in the flag, makes it very, very difficult to shoot any dart at them without shooting a dart at the country. You know, we've wrapped them around the perfection of the Constitution as if it were the word of God itself. And so I think that therein lies the real problem. That's where the flag waving is really the thing that the right has been able to whip the people up to really now think, if you say anything about the founders, if what we've already told you, if you come against that, then there is where the danger lies. And I think that's where the problem is, because we're now unearthing truths that are different than what we've been taught. And it feels like treason to, I think, to those that have been hearing this from the right. And that's how it's being taught. George Washington was next to Jesus.
Just about. He couldn't tell a lie, right?
He couldn't tell a lie. He couldn't do it.
Couldn't tell a lie. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny when people are cornered, then they start backing up and say, well, no, it's not really. They're teaching this. They're not teaching critical race theory as it actually is. They're doing something else. And to some extent, sure, a teacher may be influenced by things outside that they bring to the classroom.
Right.
I don't know how you would prove or disprove that. I mean, it's in the teacher's head, really. I mean, a teacher has their own perspective, whether they're white, black, Asian, or whatever. That teacher has their own life experiences, and they might teach from a particular vantage point of view, whether it's CRT or something else.
Right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you would fight against that. Like, I'm not sure I know what they're trying to do, but it seems like on some level, a losing battle, because you're kind of swinging against air. But also seems like they've taken an argument that can be used against anything that they deem that isn't fit to remove from the schools. So it sounds like to me that, you know, history is going to be even more, you know, in terms of what you learn in school, neuter than what it is now. I mean, that's really what they want.
Sure. And I think that when you see the aim, I don't think that you see them aiming at anything else other than this idea, you know, when he said, you know, equality versus equity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, I mean, when you look at the view, like it's just from the verbiage alone, what would be the problem there? But because it's interpreted in the same way, that it's going to be critical to me,
right? And
therefore my children, as he saw the children, he didn't see children of all nations. I'm sure, I'm speaking for him, but I mean, I would imagine that when he said our children, I suspect that there was a group of kids that he saw that were going to be demeaned by the question of equity and equality. And for some reason, I have no idea why he would think that somehow that curriculum, that the idea of discussing that and knowing by definition what that is, because critical race theory is really about defining things. You know, it's just about definitions. And we can't come together as a nation unless we define things correctly. And the way we've been operating right now, as you know, as great as we are, we have different definitions of what equality and equity really is.
So you've talked a minute about equity and equality. I'm going to put up this slide, and you can speak to it, because it's an equity versus equality slide. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, I think that when you begin to look at equality and the idea of like, here's what we're looking for, the same exact things, you know, the equity was equality won't get us where we need to go simply because we have started from a lower place. You know, with equity makes sure that it evens the playing field. You know, the reality is that that's exactly what I think You know, when you look at affirmative action, that's exactly what affirmative action and along those lines was designed to do. That, you know, when you look at what we have right now, I suspect that that's really where we really are, that there are groups of people that are in the nothing category, that have nothing to stand on. And the country has started with people who built the fence to make sure that one group of people could look over. It was designed that way. And I think that's what the theory is about. It was designed this way. So knowing that I could never look over, knowing that there's no way unless I had a crate, by nature, this was designed so that I could never get over. Designed to make sure that only a group of people could see. And so when you look at that, there's, you know, the props that would come up to help a group of people to see over that fence are not like, you know, poor them. It is to make sure now that we have a society that comes to this place of true equity and true equality so we can all see the same goal.
Right.
Now, if we don't get there, that's on the person. But you can't reach a goal you can't see.
100% true. 100% true. And you can't see over the fence. You don't even know what's on the other side.
That's right.
100. That's absolutely correct. So listen, we got about 4 minutes left, and we have 2 callers. So let's end up with some callers. Song Fada.
She's back again.
Again, welcome to Pass the Noise.
I can't get enough of Pass the Noise. But here's what I wanted to ask. As you all have talked about just a myriad of things, the question that's looming in my head is, what is everyone afraid of? What's the fear that's driving actually all sides? Because we've heard a reaction from African Americans who are railing against this, but what's their fear? We've heard from conservatives who are railing against this. What's their fear? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Quickly, history can be painful. Looking back in history can be painful. If you ever watched any historical representations of slavery, even the Civil War, which is brutal and horrible, it hurts. It's painful. It's painful to watch. It's painful to experience, even though you weren't there vicariously. I think that people avoid pain whenever they can. So rather than looking back at the painful history of this country, we just say, yeah, it happened, but it was so long ago. No one should be feeling any effects of that now. Let's look forward. Let's get past that. I think that's the thing. I think Black people don't want to be told you can't make it no matter what, which is clearly not true. And white people don't want to be told you're holding down Black people. So it's sort of this dichotomy. We have people on both sides of the fence who don't want to hear something that may be true. Some white people may be holding back some Black people. Some Black people can't make it because of their circumstances based on the system. Those are truths, and you might not want to believe that. You might want to say, if I just work hard and I just do this, I'm going to make it. It's like, no, there's parts of the system that are going to trip you up. That doesn't mean you're going to stay down, but you got to understand that there are obstacles in your place and in your way because of this country's history as those things flow down through history today. That's just a fact.
That's awesome.
My view.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean Fed.
Thank you.
And Willie Mae is back.
Willie Mae's back, but I'm not back with my question. I'm back with a question from Pamela Maziar. She was unable to get on, and she wanted me to ask the question for her.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in proxy. What she wanted to know was this: how are biracial children affected by this? She said because they're more than one race, and she said she's got biracial children in her family. So how do they identify with CRT, and what do we do about those kids?
Great question. We teach them. You know, in the end of the day, CRT is, first of all, it's a theory, and children aren't going to be taught it specifically, right? So we know that about CRT, but if we just look at the discussion, this is really about truth. So they're, you know, if they're American children, they're going to learn true American history. You know, this is not really going to be about whether you're Black or white. This is really going to be about how America actually works, and that's really what it's all about. You know, the system of education, the system that work in the, you know, the legal areas of our society, in every single area, they're just going to learn the very same things next to a child that's Asian, next to a child that's Indian, and next to a child that's white. They're going to learn the true American history and the true American systems, because the truth of the matter is they're going to all grow up to have to make the same America better. So I think CRT is about history. You know, if you had a child that was biracial and you were talking about what was going on in 1852, how would they deal with that? They would deal with the idea that, listen, there was a person who was enslaved in Georgia in 1852, and here was a slave owner. And that's just the fact. That was just the truth. 1865, here is when the war ended. And, you know, here's when slaves were set free. That's just the truth. So it's really about truth. It's not about you can't identify with this, because if you were an Italian child, we would want that Italian child to hear the truth about America. And their identification of it is that there's no way that they identify with something that happened 100 years ago, but they understand American history as it actually happened. That's what it's all about. So it's not about making sure that each person's race is identified. It's making sure that we understand how race affects us all in this country. No matter whether you're biracial, because biracial kids are going to feel the same. They're going to feel racism one way or the other. That may be from Black people, that may be from white people, that may be from both. You know, so we'll all have to realize how it affects us all in this country.
Okay.
So hopefully, Pamela Maziel will get all that. Hopefully, you've been effectively give her every bit of that.
I'm going to do my best.
And we'll work on it. Make sure we can make sure she's able to get on the next time. We'll see if there's any kinks we're working out, and I'll make sure she's able to get on.
Okay. And don't forget to get me on too.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, so listen, so we're out of time, but I just want to say, if you are having an issue getting on, we know 2 people already. If you have an issue getting on, hit us up on the Facebook page. Just leave us a comment on our page, and we'll work with you to get you on. We want you to be able to come on and participate in the broadcast. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. We could do this for another hour or 2. I mean,
right.
We could talk all day, but we're going to cut it off here. But I just want to thank everyone for listening, for participating, whether you're listening to it live or on the replay, and hope you'll join us next week when we come out with another topic. But Apostle just really enjoyed this conversation.
I did too.
It's an important thing that we have to talk about, and I'm just glad that we have this forum that we've kind of created where we can come here and discuss these things openly, honestly, and just
that's right,
move from there. So appreciate it.
And listen, I want to encourage everybody, don't forget to share. Listen, don't hesitate to share this. Tell your friends that we're here. So, next week, we want to just increase this audience. We want to increase this opportunity so that we can get past this noise. So listen, thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
All right. Take care.